And so I don't know whether I had to go to the bathroom or, I came in, she was asleep, I gave her a kiss, I took my clothes off, I hopped in the bed. So I don't remember, I didn't keep track of that kind of stuff then,
Right.
But I know it was early in the morning. And when I don't know whether I felt a presence in the room or whatever. Maybe I had to get up and go to the bathroom, but I would sleep on my side and on my stomach. And when I turned around, this person was there.
Generation X Paranormal. Well, hey everybody, welcome back.
Hey everyone.
I'm Logan.
And I'm Nicole.
And we are Generation X Paranormal. So, today we have a very interesting guest.
Very special guest.
Very special guest. And I'm going to open it up by saying that there may be some folks that have challenges with this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. That's perfectly okay. We have no problem with that. And I'm sure our guest has no problem with that.
No.
We just ask you to have an open mind, just
listen.
Just listen. Yeah. And who we have on today is Reverend Michael Carter. And he's quite unique and very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell us a little bit about Michael?
So Reverend Michael Carter is an ordained interfaith minister, and he received his BA degree in letters from the College of New Rochelle, where he graduated cum laude. He received his master's in divinity degree from Union Theological Seminary in New York City. He has served as a staff chaplain at various hospitals in New York and in North Carolina. A long-time UFO contactee, his book, Alien Scriptures, Extraterrestrials in the Holy Bible, was #1 on Amazon.com's list of UFO-related books. Michael has also appeared on George Norrie's Coast to Coast radio show and on his TV show Beyond Belief on Gaiam Television.
Right.
Other TV appearances include being a regular consultant on the History Channel's Ancient Alien series, as well as being featured in the UFO TV documentary The Real 4400 and UFOs The Hidden Evidence on the Travel Channel. Reverend Carter was also featured in Steven Spielberg's TV documentary, Abduction Diaries for the Sci-Fi Channel. Diaries was the precursor to the Spielberg's HBO series, Taken.
Great show.
His latest TV appearance was on the History Channel's History's Greatest Mysteries, hosted by Lawrence Fishburne. The episode is on the Phoenix Lights. Right now, Michael serves as the minister for the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Shenandoah Valley, located in the beautiful mountains of North Carolina.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Morpheus is what I think of, when he's talking about, the Matrix and stuff, and with Lawrence Fishburne, that he's doing a show with him for some reason. Anyway, guys, we're really excited to talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go ahead and bring him on.
Let's talk to him.
Yeah. Well, hey, Michael, how you doing?
Good to be here, brother. Thanks for having me. It's good to see both of you.
Yeah, good
absolutely.
To see you.
It's good to see you. Honestly, we talk to a lot of people in the paranormal, but
yes.
And you're always looking forward to a lot of different guests. And I'll be honest with you, when we scheduled you, I did a mental circle around that one. I said, I cannot wait to talk to him. Quite honestly, there are so many things that I know we could go kind of explore, and that, we're going to do a lot of that, but we're absolutely elated to have you. So.
Yeah. And you know how it is with questions, one question will overlap and you wind up getting three answers, so shoot. Anything's, if I don't know, I'm one of those people who say, I don't know.
Okay. That works great. Well, in that sense, for the people in our audience that may not know you, can you kind of give us like a little history, kind of background, kind of 30,000 foot view, and kind of what brought you to kind of where you are now?
Okay. Yes. My name is Reverend Michael Carter. I am I'm an experiencer. I grew up in the Baptist tradition. I'm also a father. I do have a congregation, a Unitarian Universalist congregation here in North Carolina. I lived in New York for about, well, it's long. I thought 27 years when I did the math. Probably about 29 years. I
Hmm.
was an actor in New York. I get a pension,
Oh,
um,
wow.
but it's not a big pension, but yeah. And I, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a priest. That's the only word I knew for it. And then I got bitten by the theater bug, and I went to New York and hung out in LA a little bit too. But I wasn't happy. It was the greatest years of my life in some ways. But I wanted to serve. I wanted to serve human beings. I wanted to make a difference in my life. And I'm not saying you can't do that as an actor, but you have to be kind of self-absorbed because it's a lot about, you,
Sure.
classes, agents, lessons, those kind of things. And I just didn't, I got tired of it.
Sure.
And so I went to seminary. And right before that, I started having these experiences with off-world intelligences. And I never planned to be where I am now. And by that, I mean speaking about this, being on Ancient Aliens, being on these TV shows. That was not in the plan.
Sure.
But the experiences kind of led me there. And so I'm living the life I want to live. I have a congregation. I do a lot of counseling. I'm a dad. I'm a healer, and I feel like I'm giving back. And that's really kind of what I wanted to do anyway. So I live a pretty good life. I'm not a wealthy man, but I don't have to be. I'm comfortable,
Sure.
Right.
and I guess that kind of. I hope that helps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You know, I often find that when I was younger, the idea of wealth was one thing. And as I got
Hmm.
older, it definitely changed and morphed and became a lot of different things. Now, wealth to me means being able to get up in the morning and say, okay, I'm gonna do the best I can for the day.
Hmm.
Try to treat people the way I
Yes.
would want to be treated. And
No.
when I rest my head at night, if I can say I accomplished those two things, I did okay.
No. Point well taken, Logan. And so I will rephrase. I am a wealthy man, but it's not necessarily as far as finances.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Right.
maybe that'll
Well,
change too.
Hey,
yeah.
let's hope, right?
Yeah. Money does not buy
No, it
happiness.
doesn't.
No.
No, it does
No,
not.
No.
it might a little bit at times, but it's
It
Yeah,
fleeting,
it can
it's
right?
not.
help.
I
It
mean,
can
I have
help.
nothing. I have
Yeah.
nothing against money.
No,
Yep.
And I don't. I have nothing against people who have money. I just don't want it to be where that's the only thing I'm living for.
sure.
Right. The focus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think people that obtain mass wealth like that, I think they find themselves in that. But
it's hard.
well, yeah, oh yeah.
Mhm.
So
So I've been told.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, tough. It's got to be a tough life,
So I've been told. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I want to start with the experiencer part first.
Yeah.
There is and we've spoken to quite a few different experiencers for I guess the every vertical, I would say. I hate to break it down like that, but
Hmm.
all different facets of the paranormal. But your experiences and the things that you were going to talk about
Yeah.
is very unique for me for sure. But yeah, let's go ahead and start with kind of the experiencer part. What was your first experience that really kind of gave you that cathartic change in your life?
Uh, December 28th, 1989. Coming back from seeing the pyramids on the Yucatan. At the time, I was with my girlfriend. We went to Cancun and we took a day trip on the Yucatan. And we saw the Mayan pyramids at Chichen Itza and Tulum. I guess I want to preface it. I told you I came from a pretty conservative Baptist background, African American Baptist tradition. Um, and even though I do have some Cherokee in me, so we both have that kind of, we got a lineage there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, and like, I say all that because I did not believe in what I'm talking about now. And I didn't believe it because I said it wasn't in the Bible, right? what a difference 20 years makes. But I think in 1989, I was leaving Christianity proper. And by that, I mean you're saved and I'm not. That didn't work for me anymore. And I was trying to figure out, how do I make this fit? I still want to believe in these stories, in some of these stories in the Bible. I still want to believe that there is a great spirit, or, you know, a great mystery or something out there that I'm connected to. So I was trying to navigate that. But when I came back to New York, I was living in New York. My girlfriend that night, we got off at JFK. We went home. I was invited to a gathering. She didn't want to go. She was tired. I was tired too. It was freezing, so I wanted to gloat. I was nice copper color, and my hair was lighter, and I wanted to kind of let people see that and just rub it in that you were freezing your butts off here, and I just came back from the Yucatan.
Right.
So she said, I'm staying home. So I caught the subway downtown. I mean, to Times Square, and walked over to the river. And, you know, it was lovely. You know, we've had deviled eggs, no alcoholic beverages, food, chatted, people oohed and awed. Oh, wow. And that was nice for me. And so I went back home. And when I went back uptown, we lived on the Upper West Side. She still lives there, my first wife. We're still very good friends. And but at that time, we weren't married. And so I don't know whether I had to go to the bathroom, or, you know, I came in, she was asleep, I gave her a kiss, I took my clothes off, I hopped in the bed. So I don't remember, I didn't keep track of that kind of stuff then, you know,
Right.
but I know it was early in the morning. And when you know, I don't know whether I felt a presence in the room or whatever. Maybe I had to get up and go to the bathroom, but I would sleep on my side and on my stomach. And when I turned around, this person was there.
Wow.
And now they didn't have this. A friend of mine who's an experiencer, she's an artist, obviously. And all the people I'm going to tell you I met, she made bust for me.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and he, I'm saying he, could have been a she, could have been an it. I'm going to say he. They didn't have this. I had her do the kind of Buddha thing. This was what they had on, like a like a jump, like
a jumpsuit, like a metallic jumpsuit.
yeah,
Almost
like
looks
NASCAR,
like a Mylar or something
like
like that.
NASCAR. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and was about maybe 3-4 feet tall tops. Was chalk white. Wasn't gray, but had the phenotype of gray. The head went a little more that way, and I was scared to death. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. She didn't move. She didn't move. Now, we talked about that later on, but she didn't move. And this being looked at me, and I looked at him, her, and there was a blue light around this person, and then around that was a white light. Like our apartment was lit up like Times Square. And this was on the Upper West Side. It wasn't like in a rural area. And so I pulled the covers up over my head. I mean, I've never been that scared.
Yeah.
I pulled the covers up over my head and got in a fetal position. And I can chuckle about it now. Then it was like life or death. And it was cold that night, and I felt like I was outside the building. It was the Excelsior Hotel. It's up there, still there. And I heard this wind blowing in my ears, like whoosh. And I finally grew a pair. I said, because my mind was trying to, you know, this was unreal. And when I pulled the covers down, nobody was there. It was like I never left.
Wow.
And you know, I had a lot of energy. Sandy woke up, and she's a very deeply spiritual woman. And I told her what happened, and she didn't say, "What are you, some kind of a nut?" She just said, "Okay, calm down." And you know, they started visiting twice a month for about 8 months to a year, every full and new moon. And when they would come, they would paralyze me. I couldn't move. And now they were coming when she wasn't home, and she worked at night.
Mm.
And I would feel like this electricity going through my body, like through my whole body, and like in my throat chakra and all that. One time they showed me, when the little off-white people came, they showed me a past life. Guess what I was? I was a priest. And they showed me an event where I was speaking in front of a large group of people that happened like maybe 5-10 years down the line. And then in between, and then I started wanting to study all this stuff like healing and tarot cards, and I always saw auras even before they came, and psychic development stuff. And what I could get by on less sleep. My hair and nails grew like really fast. The only way I can explain it is that I felt more intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
And the sleep was a big deal because I didn't need sleep anymore, it felt like. And my heart was more open. I felt more loving. That's the best way I could put it. And they still scared me. To this day, I still have post-traumatic stress, not as bad as I did before. But it's hard for me to be home at night by myself. Like if my wife has to go out of town or whatever, because they can just pop up. I could be looking at you, and then I could go there, and they could. That's the thing that flips me out, that they could just pop in like that.
Right.
So, and then I went to a support group. I met Bud Hopkins, the late Bud Hopkins. He regressed me. Dr. Gene Mundy regressed me, so it helped me know that I wasn't crazy. And then down the line, this person showed up, a reptilian person, walked through the wall in our bedrooms. Andy wasn't there. Tall, big muscle guy, had a tail. His eyes were gorgeous, not at the time, but they looked like a cat. They were yellow, and the pupil went like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
And I know this brother was a male because his mouth didn't move, but it was like I had a,
Telepathic
kind of.
Yeah, like I had speakers in my head. And he said, "Don't be afraid," and he touched me. But his voice was a male voice.
Okay.
And he just looked at me, and I looked at him, thinking I was going to defecate on myself or something. and then he just walked out.
Wow.
And by this time, I'm living a double life, but I found a support group, and you can't talk about this stuff. Right. And when I started going to conferences, I was selling cassette tapes. I was talking about the Bible, because that's what I look at religion. I don't care about propulsion systems and back engineering. I'm more geared to there's a spiritual aspect to this.
Right.
So I'm jumping over stuff. My master's thesis became my first book, Alien Scriptures, Extraterrestrials, and the Holy Bible. I had a little publisher in Arizona, Blue Star Productions, Barbara DeBolt, and she was the one who said, "You got to grow a pair. You got to tell people about this. They need to hear it." So I wrote the book, but I didn't put my experiences in it. The second edition I did. Then I just started, I started building a resume. People, and I was getting tired of acting, but I went to seminary, got married, got divorced, got married again, got divorced. Married now. They came, and then maybe a couple years would go by, but then I started like a producer from Hollywood, California called from Prometheus Productions. "Got your book here. Want you to come on Ancient Aliens." That's how that started. A friend of mine got me on Shirley MacLaine show. So I did a Steven Spielberg thing, Abduction Diaries. So what happened was, as I started doing more stuff, speaking at conferences, when people would say, "Send us your bio," when I was doing it, I said, "Oh my God, it was even impressive to me.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? I'm doing History
sure.
Channel. I'm getting there. So then, July 4th, 2013, rough year. My dad, my biological dad had died. I was getting divorced for the second time. And I was getting fired from my job. I used to work as a hospital chaplain
Okay.
Mm.
before I got the church gig. And July 4th, 2013, my dad had died. I developed a blood clot. I don't know how. Maybe it was stress. It was from my ankle to the groin area on my right leg. I mean, my leg was huge. I had never had a blood clot before. I thought maybe I pulled a muscle. So I go to the doctor. The doctor says, you must go right now, drive yourself. Did you come by yourself? Yeah. And I had to get, what do you call it?
A stent
They
or
looked,
something. Right.
and they saw it. And, it could have been life threatening.
Sure.
So, wow. So I had a lot of friends who fought in Vietnam. This all is going to come together.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't. I was a little too young. And some of them would tell me what happened there. Some of them were very close, and so, but my friends were telling me about, you go to sleep in your foxhole, sometimes it's rain in it, there's incoming and outgoing artillery, it was a freaking nightmare. And they said this is what we had to go through. And I was like, oh my God. So July 4th, 2013, here and where I live in North Carolina, there was a thunderstorm. And it was so welcoming to me. I don't like fireworks. But my ex and I were still trying to make it work and had a child. They loved it. So, I wanted to be a good dad. So I went. But I didn't like it because you're sitting so close. It's hot. You sit out there for 2 hours. The fireworks are only 30 minutes. It was just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so July 4th, 2013, they canceled the fireworks here. Thank you. And so, but it was so loud. It was like, it felt like it was artillery. And I said to myself, this must be what my friends were talking about. I was lying in bed. I could not go to sleep. I was reading. So, I don't know whether I felt someone in the room or what have you, but when I turned around, this person was in my room. This little Nordic looking person. Now, he didn't have that, he had a hoodie on, a cowl, and he had like a page board. You could see the things there. But he was built like the reptilian was built. You could see the muscles and the pec muscles and stuff through his robe. He had a robe on, grayish color with a rope belt. And I was like, holy, and he was almost as tall as my ceiling, which was about 8.5 feet.
Wow.
And he put his hand out, and a green light came out of his hand, and it hit me in my stomach. I watched it hit me, but I didn't feel anything. And then the molecules, he just went away. So the first person I called, this was at 9:50, 10 minutes to 10 Eastern time. First person I called was, you probably know him, Preston Dennett.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we do.
We know
I
him.
called Preston because he wrote a book on this. I'm in his second book with this story, but this was before, because I said, he'll know what I'm talking about. And Preston wasn't home because it was about 10:07 there. He was living in California. Now he lives over here on the East Coast. Anyway, Preston wasn't there. So I had told my ex about it, my second wife, and I went over to see them the next day, and they both did this at the same time. My daughter, they healed you. My leg had shrunken back to normal.
Wow.
I didn't take a picture of it. That was flip phone time, but I didn't think about it.
Yeah.
So I had a healing from these people. And the big thing with that was I had to tell the doctors because they wanted to know. When I, because every week, 10 days, they go stick you and see, and I went back and they didn't believe, man. I mean, I didn't tell them the truth. They would have locked me up. But
Well,
I
yeah.
just told them, they kept bugging me. How did it happen? What happened? What'd you do? And finally I said, look, I don't know what happened. You don't know what happened. Aren't you happy for me? Be happy for me. I'm healed. It's over. And they were like, oh, okay, yeah, no, we get it. We want you to be, So we got away from that. Last but not least, in 2019, I was speaking at a UFO conference in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is about 2 hours from me. And it went really well. First time I ever got a standing ovation at one of these UFO conferences. So I was really like, wow, okay, they're hearing it. And so met a lot of people, gave out my cards, sold a lot of books, that kind of thing. When I got back, about 2 days after I got back, a young lady I met there who was a big fan, she said, I told my friend about you, and she's going to buy your books, and, you were just wonderful, yada, yada, yada. And she said, but she has something to tell you. Would you mind talking to her? And I said, okay. She said, well, should I give her your phone number? I was like, ugh. And she said, well, I'm just give my number out. So she said, well, she's right here. And I said, okay. She said, she's a psychic. I said, okay. And she said, she's a lawyer. And I'm like, that's an interesting combination.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
kidding.
Talk about right and left hemisphere. So
Yeah.
she got on the phone. This is my last story, and you have to ask questions.
That's okay.
And she said, you don't know me, and I know you can think this is weird. And she says, but she said, you ever seen a praying mantis before? I said, what do you mean? You talking about an insect? She said, no, the praying mantis beings. I said, no. And she said, do you believe in them? I said, yeah, they exist. It's all kinds of people exist.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, well, I see them around you. And I said, oh. And she said, do you understand what I'm saying? I said, yeah. She said, and they're going to make themselves known to you. I said, okay. I mean, what are you supposed to say to that? She
Right.
said,
Yeah.
like real soon, like in 3 days. I said, what? So we hang up. I lived in a little apartment then. The first night, I walk around the house, the apartment, and, I felt a little weird. But my brother was murdered back in 95, and someone robbed him and killed him. And he smoked cigarettes. So sometimes he would be around because I don't smoke. And I could tell when he was around me because, cigarette smoke. So, I would
Right.
talk to him and that kind of thing. But that wasn't what this was. So I said, oh, come on, this is auto-suggestion. I said, get a grip. But, remember, I already got PTSD.
Right.
So the second night, I'm walking from room to room. I go get a glass of water. And I'm like, this is getting a little weird. I'm starting to feel the hair on my neck stand up and that kind of thing. The third night, I'm lying on my bed. I couldn't go to sleep. And I was too lazy to get up and go meditate. So I said, I'm going to meditate right here on the bed. And I closed my eyes and I felt the bed sink. And this person was about this far from my face.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, that's it. And the big eyes looked at me, and I hyperventilated. I could not breathe, and just stared at me. And it would seem like a long time, but it probably was more, just a few seconds. And then just disappeared, just dissolved, like the blonde brother did. And I called the friend and said, thank you for telling me you were correct. So those are, I've had other things happen, but those are the big ticket items. Sometimes in dreams they would come and stuff like that. Um, but they led me to where I am today with the healing. They never said this is something you should do, but they did kind of urge me
Mm-hmm.
to go into prayer and hand on healing, and um, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Wow. Wow.
Wow. What a
Honestly, I think that's the first story where I've heard contact with that many different. Usually it's like one or two,
Mhm.
but for to have, man,
yeah. And
Yeah,
then
but
to
I mean, it
have
was hard. Yeah, that's why
yeah,
I said, you got to make these things for me. Let me tell you who these people look. Yeah, that's why I keep
yeah,
up. I mean, what, I mean, I just don't collect extraterrestrials.
right,
Uh, but
that's
yeah,
funny.
that's it. That was it.
And to have an experience with every
That's what I'm saying.
yeah,
Like usually it's like one or two
right. You get either a
over and
gray or
over or
right.
something, but not
So
wow. Like they're all working together. That's what I get from that.
Yeah. Or either
Hmm
they're
I'm
saying, "Hey, you got to check out that brother's crib, man. That brother's got he's got a nice apartment, man. He's
Right.
up there." Yeah.
this man's going to Tulum and
Yeah, he's
stuff. So we
going
gotta check him
places. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So there
yeah.
you
To a
are.
psychiatrist. That's where I'm going.
Right.
Yeah, I hear that. So there you are with all these experiences now, and you talked a little bit about of being kind of split mind. When did you start to notice that? I guess I wouldn't say faith, but the way your belief structure kind of was set up. Obviously, it had to come kind of crashing down a little bit, or at least it definitely had to have probably changed a bit.
Oh, a
When did you?
bit, man. It
Yeah.
changed. Yeah, that's a great question. Well, you got to remember, I was already leaving the Orthodox Christianity of my youth.
hmm
Why? Great question. No, just because I knew people, gay folk, native folk, white folk. I mean, I'm living in New York and I was just raised that way. You just
hmm
accepted people. And some of these folks didn't believe what I believed. And I couldn't wrap my mind around that a loving God would barbecue these people
hmm
just because they had a different belief. I just couldn't accept that anymore. So when I met these brothers and sisters, it just affirmed that. Do you know what I mean? And
Yes.
I was on a journey. I was looking for the historical Jesus, not the Jesus of faith, where you're saved, I'm not, and that. So I was on my own personal quest. Into Buddhism, and I was an atheist at one time, agnostic. So I was on this journey, and I just said, if these people came to visit me in 1989, that was the beginning, CE, then they must have been coming visiting folks in 1989 BCE. You know what I mean? They
Oh
must
yeah.
have been here.
Yeah.
For sure.
And then I found Barry Downing's book, UFOs in the Bible. He wrote it in 1968, and that was like water to a thirsty man because he
Mm.
wasn't an experiencer, and he and I are friends. But this is a minister talking about this stuff. Now my theology is different now than his. Barry maintained that Orthodox Christian faith. Um, but and he made it make sense. And then I'm reading Eric Van Donigan, and then I met Zachariah Sitchin, who lived. He was my neighbor. He lived about 6 blocks from me in New York, and met him, and it just opened my mind. Like Oliver Wendell Holmes says that when the mind is stretched, it can't go back to its original dimensions, and that's
hmm
what was happening to me. And so I couldn't go back.
Right.
Once I started looking at the Bible as a UFO book and not necessarily a religious book, I couldn't go back.
Yeah.
Do I believe in something greater than me? Yeah. Sometimes I call it God, sometimes I call it the universe, but it doesn't matter what you call it.
hmm
And now, yes, Jesus, and I tried to get away from Jesus, and I don't mean that like he's the only way. Not at all. There are other ways, whatever that means to you. But when I got away, I always went back to those teachings because I'm a man of the West. I'm educated in the West, Western culture. That's the story
hmm
you can't get rid of it.
Right.
It's always in you. So I look at him as a guide and as a brother. But any God that was in him is in me as well, and you too as well. And I think he's even almost said as such, if you ask. Kingdom of heaven is with you, within you. You know, now somebody else, Buddha may put it another way. Lao Tzu may put it another way. But you don't have to look outside yourself. There is something outside, but I'm part of that. I'm part of that. I'm not there up over there and I'm over here. People don't like to hear that because they think you're arrogant. They think that you think you're God. But any God that's in is in me too, if you want to use that word. That's how I roll. And so I was just on this journey, and then I got just more comfortable. Well, now I'm giving you the truncated version.
Sure.
But yeah. And so, you know, I got you see my extraterrestrial pictures behind me. I got Tut. I got Bishop Tutu and the Dalai Lama over here. I got a Black Jesus over here. I got a Hindu, a Sai Baba here. I got, you know, because all of those are teachers of truth. I got, what's the name? You know, the Buddhist goddess of compassion. Kuan Yin, you know, I got them all. I got Mary upstairs because they're just all symbols
Right.
of the same thing. My Christian friends hate that because they figure, oh yeah, there are other religions, but I got the right one. Wink, wink.
Right.
I'm tolerant of them, but I got, you know, I don't feel that way. And all of these cultures talk about star people.
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
The Hopi, you know, the Cherokee talk about the Palladians. I mean, you know, they come here. The Vimanas in the Hindu tradition, the flying cities they talk about in the Vedas, in the Mayan Popol Vuh, they talk about these things. So we've been invaded.
Oh,
We
yeah.
were
yeah.
invaded, and we still are invaded.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to get that. And some of these beings are advanced, not just technologically, but spiritually. Some of them are more advanced technologically. And our ancestors thought they were gods.
Yeah.
And that's not saying there isn't something larger, but they thought that these beings were. Because I would have thought so too, man.
Well,
If you went back in time, you got your little Apple computer, you got probably a weapon or something, you know,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
talking on the phone, you're texting. These people would they give you the money out of their pockets or whatever.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
they didn't know.
They
And
would think you're
so
unworldly at that point.
that's it. And you can tell these beings are that they're not, you know, they're not human, but they're not perfect. I mean, you know, they make love, they get drunk, they fight among themselves. In all the cultures, you know, in Greek culture, you got Zeus and you got Prometheus and you got Asherah in the Hebrew tradition, and they make love and they drink and they fight and they pray and they do. You know, that's not a god. That's another being.
Yeah.
They're godlike. So anyway, that's my story.
No, that's so much said there that's just amazing. I'm trying to wrap my mind around a lot of that.
Well, no, it is. I mean, people are leaving the churches for a lot of reasons, but a lot of people left the church like I did because of its hypocrisy. You know, I'm saved, you're not, and what have you. But mainly people leave because, in my research, is because I can't worship a God who's going to sanction genocide. Okay? Let's destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, men, women, and children. Let's have you go into the land of Canaan and dash babies against the stone. That's not a God.
No.
But we've been taught to look at it that way. And so you got this split. And if you believe in a God who's vengeful, if you believe in a God who's wrathful, if you believe in a God, you know, he's concerned about who you sleep with and if you're circumcised and you shouldn't marry that, that's not a God. But if you believe in that, that's why you have these wars. Because if your God can commit genocide, then you say it's okay to commit genocide. If your God is vengeful, then you're going to say an eye for an eye, and it makes monsters out of us. But if you don't look at the Bible that way, if you look at it as a book, the idea of God is in there. I'm talking about the Old Testament.
Right.
Jesus is talking about something else.
Yes.
But if you look at it like a book of our ancestors trying to tell us this is what it was like for us to share this planet with people who weren't from here, then you don't get that split. So you're not looking for morals from it, because there is no moral when Yahweh says, go into the land of Canaan and take whatever they got and kill them. There's no moral there.
No.
But but if you're brought up to look at it like that, then it makes you crazy. But if you look at it like this is a book of our ancestors telling us about flying chariots. If you read the book of Josephus, he talks about flying shields. If you look at pillar of cloud by day, then you go, they didn't have words for that then.
Right.
But we have words for that now. We would call that an invasion.
Yeah.
If they're talking about flying chariots and stuff, they're telling you there's something in the sky that flies. They don't have they didn't have words for that. We have a word for that. That's a UAP.
Right.
That's a submerged thing. Jonah's talking about the whale. Maybe that's not a whale. Maybe that's a UFO or US. It's a submerged identified object.
That's interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, because that was something when I was a kid. I was like, how could he get swallowed by a whale? Even as a child, I
And
was
then
like, that
spit
doesn't
out.
make any sense. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're trying
Like
to
that person
tell
would
you.
die.
They're trying to tell you in the language of their day.
It makes sense.
And so in the Old Testament, they talk about in Exodus, the pillar of cloud by day, the pillar of fire by night. They're saying that it looks like a cloud in the daytime and it glows at night. Well, modern day UFOs do that. Sometimes they camouflage themselves in clouds.
Yes.
And they do glow at night. If you go to the New Testament, Jesus leaves in a cloud. These people weren't stupid. They know you couldn't ride clouds, but they were trying to tell you what they saw him leave on. And of course it's all about translation. But if you go back to Genesis 6, where it says the sons of God, let us make human beings man in our image. Well, the Hebrew word is Elohim. It's the oldest Hebrew word as far as I know, and it means us. Let us make man, and it means the gods. It's us. So there's more. When they say let us, who's us?
Right.
Some people say it's the Trinity, but they didn't have a Trinity back then. The Trinity wasn't even thought about until the 3rd or 4th century. Let us make man in our image. That means that means more than one gods. These gods.
That's wild.
Wow. Yeah, most people don't know the translation. Because everything's in English now.
Yeah.
And it's been translated so many times.
You got to get a good Bible, like the New Jerusalem Bible or the NRSV. You got to get a good Bible, and it will say, and it will, the footnotes will tell you that a good Bible will say this is what it's called, but this is what it's called now. But Elohim, it's anywhere you put the word Lord in the Bible, put the word Elohim. It makes more sense. Anywhere you see the word angel in the Bible, put extraterrestrial. It makes more sense. Nowhere
my mind's like blown.
Nowhere in the Bible does it say angels have wings. Now,
no, it doesn't.
But I'm not saying they don't. But nowhere in the Bible do they have wings. I think our ancestors put wings on them to let us know they could fly. That these were gods. They flew.
Well, I know there's always, when it speaks in there, it talks about a golden light around them, doesn't it? A lot in the Bible when they're talking about angels.
They don't speak about it. There's a lot of lights. There's a lot of lights around these holy people and what have you. Yeah, just like it is around extraterrestrials. But some of them look like human beings.
Yeah,
if you look at Abraham and Sarah, they must have looked like human beings. They didn't say they had wings. But it must have been something about them to let them know that
Yeah,
they
that
weren't
they
human. And sometimes you
right.
don't know if they're human or not.
Or they came from the sky.
And remember in Hebrews, it says you got to be good to people because you may be entertaining angels unawares. Was that Hebrews 13? Yeah. So that means some of them can look like us, like that blonde person. I mean, you could tell he wasn't from here, but he was
Right.
more humanoid.
Right.
He
More
looked
like
he
impressive.
looked
Yeah.
different. He looked different than this person or
Yeah.
this person,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
who clearly are not human looking. So anyway, that's what I come to believe. That's where my research has taken me, and I'm not the only one. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't read the Bible. That there's some beautiful stories in there, they're
Mm-hmm.
truths, but they're not all moral stories of a God, because the God in that Bible, which is Yahweh, does some terrible things.
Hmm.
Yeah. Hmm.
With with all of that, and so being in that community and sort of like you had said, you had started to kind of transition away from, I guess for lack of better words, the everyday Christianity type belief structure. What challenges? Obviously, there had to been a lot of external challenges to your belief structure, uh, and I'm sure that's actually still to this day, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you? First of all, in my personal humble opinion, all of that makes a ton of sense to
It
me.
does make sense.
But then again, I did not grow up going to church. I didn't grow up,
Mhm.
in that setting. But and I probably have a different point of reference than some may have. But yeah, what were did you wrestle with that for a very long time? I would
No, I
imagine it
did.
was
I did,
okay.
but I was
Yeah.
wrestling with that before the ET thing. See,
Mm-hmm.
Right, right,
and I was like the government, man. I just didn't tell people everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, because you
yeah,
had to know who you could talk to and who you couldn't
Mm-hmm.
talk to. And I don't argue with people even today, you
Yeah.
know. And so I did wrestle with that even before this. Is Jesus really that judgmental? I had to learn some biblical languages, or at least learn some translations.
hmm,
And the Jesus I came up with is very different than mainstream Christianity's Jesus, who is probably an extraterrestrial or at least a hybrid. Because if your mom is human and your daddy isn't, that means you're not fully human. But um, just that, uh,
Yeah.
but just that there was a lot of love, there was a lot of fairness, there was a lot of um, championing the underdog. It was very different from what
Mm-hmm.
we see today, and that I don't think he came here to save us. I think he just came here, and Rome played hardball, and that's the way it is.
right,
Uh, um, but he left an example of how to live. Not the only example, but there's an example of how to live, how to treat your neighbor. He didn't come here to start a new religion. His name, Christ means anointed one, Christos in Greek, and he was not. That was not his name, and it wasn't. His parents weren't Mr. and Mrs. Christ. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
right.
so, but he left an example. I happen to believe that he was part extraterrestrial, that he was a hybrid, for the reason I just shared with you. So here we have the myth of the God man, but
Yeah.
he's talking about a very different way of life than Yahweh. I was taught that the Old Testament and New Testament were connected, but Jesus never talks about Yahweh in the New Testament. Also,
No, he doesn't.
you could argue about that the God he's talking about, who he calls Father,
Mm-hmm.
is very different from the Old Testament God. Very different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Like I'm thinking as you're speaking, I'm thinking back on all the stuff I've read.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and and he brought the A game, man. He said, hey, you don't just love your friends, you love your enemies. You at least
Mm-hmm.
try to. These are ways that you can live a good life.
Right.
Right.
Whatever your God, you love your God. He didn't say if you didn't believe in me that you would die. A lot of the New Testament, just like a lot of Old Testament, was rewritten.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, if Jesus lived today, the very people who say they love him would hate him
That's true. That is very
because
true.
he would call them out on your hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm.
He would call you out on an eye for an eye. He would call you out on the death penalty. He would call you out on military adventurism. He would call you out on all those things. But when Christianity became the religion of the Roman Empire, they made Jesus very different.
Well,
I know what I want to speak about. I just
go
thought
ahead.
of
Yeah.
something. So the whole story of Moses going up in the mountain, 10 Commandments, the fire, the burning bush, all that. What is your take on that?
I don't know what Moses saw, but it was probably some technology. Remember he said the bush looked like it was consumed, but it
Yes.
wouldn't burn. He also, he's talking with Yahweh. Yahweh is the extraterrestrial God. It was a God of war. Yahweh, and you also have to remember this: the Ten Commandments weren't for everybody; they were just for the tribe of Israel. If the Ten Commandments were for everybody, then Yahweh wouldn't have said, "Go into the land that I will show you," which was Canaan, and take it.
Yeah.
He wouldn't.
There
He
wouldn't
wouldn't
be.
have said that if it was for everybody. We make it today, 20 centuries later. This is what we need to live by. They're good. They're good things, but
Mm-hmm.
they were. He tells you, "I'm a jealous God." What kind of God would be jealous? What are you jealous of? You're God, for crying out loud.
Yeah. I've
You
always wondered
know,
that too.
and you
Yeah.
should never have any other gods before me. But remember, we were invaded, so there were other gods. There was Baal, there was Kohash, there was the goddess Asherah. There were other gods there, and he said, "I don't want you talking about them. I don't want you talking to them, and I don't want you even making a likeness of them." That means you got a problem.
Hmm.
There were other gods.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
My mind's a little
Yeah.
blown,
So
honestly.
now you kind of, I'm really at a loss for words. Kind of coming full circle. You have your own parishioners now. You've got your own. You have people that are following. The things that you're saying and listening to you and
Well,
what
no, no.
is
Let
you're
me
not
be.
following. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm framing that up wrong.
No, no. Let me say this, Logan. I think I know where
Okay.
you're going.
Okay.
I don't preach this from a pulpit. I
Okay.
happen to be in a very liberal denomination,
Okay.
Unitarian, and very progressive. When I go to church on Sunday to speak, I got Wiccans there, I got Christians there, I got people.
Okay.
It's because we're open to all faiths, and we let people. We can guide, but you have to find your own. We help you. That's your spiritual path. So I don't get a lot of blowback. Now I don't preach this because it does freak some people out. And many
Sure.
years ago, someone tried to get me fired. But it's kind of like an
Mm.
open secret. People see me on television, they
Mm-hmm.
hear the podcast, they know. But no, I don't. It's not my job to do that. That's not what they hired me for.
Sure.
And
Okay.
if I did that, I would split that church because some people would say, Reverend Carter is preaching the word and he's preaching truth. And some other people would say, no, he's freaking me out. So why split that? They come there for fellowship, they come there for the community. So it's not a UFO church.
Okay.
But
Which
there are
yeah.
people there, who know that I do these podcasts, who've seen
Mhm.
the TV shows, whatever, and they just say, yeah, I believe that as well. I
Okay.
just don't have there was a lady who tried to get me fired some years ago, and it didn't work. But it was scary because I needed the job. But the other thing is that I don't, we don't have a pope. We don't have a bishop to say what you can say and what you can't say. So I
Right.
have a little
Yeah.
more leeway. There are ministers out there and scholars who believe what I say or agree with it, but they can't talk about it because they'll lose their jobs.
Yeah. That's unfortunate.
They'll lose their jobs. Or if you got tenure somewhere and you come out and say this is all about extraterrestrials, and you could lose your job. See, I don't have to worry about that right now, so I'm very fortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And you're right. That is sort of the general area I was going at because
Yeah.
I again, not having been raised that way, I would find it, it would be difficult to preach like
Yeah.
that from the pulpit, I would imagine, and then kind of have to, like you said, you would be splitting a
I
congregation.
respect my congregation.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so what that's the way it is.
Sure. No, and that makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't feel like I have to.
Right.
It's not my job to force you. I mean, our government is spending money on this. You just got to do your own research and look out of the box,
Right.
Right.
like I had to do.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of pivots a little bit to what is your feeling? And I would imagine, I think I kind of know the answer to this. With now all these congressional things that are going on,
I think it's
Gresh and all
wonderful.
those. Okay, awesome.
But I also realize that there's a faction of the government who wants us to have disclosure, and there's a faction that doesn't. So it's like these two polarities trying to wrestle with each other. I would even go so far as to say that there's some extraterrestrials who want disclosure, and there's some who don't.
That's interesting. And I find that interesting because we've spoken to quite a few that say that they feel that it's potentially that the extraterrestrials are setting the narrative.
Yeah.
I believe that too. I didn't before, but I believe that too.
Yeah.
And so we'll see where this whole thing goes.
Yeah.
But you got to remember that there was some beings, and even if you go back to the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Mesopotamian texts, remember there were some beings who wanted us to thrive. Like if you go back to of Enki and Enlil, Enki warned us about the flood, but Enlil and the other brother Enlil, they didn't care what happened to us. We were noisy, we breathed fast. It was just they just didn't need us for anything except to do their bidding. So there's always this faction. When you go to Genesis 11, that's the perfect story there. Okay, the Tower of Babel. What happens? The Elohim look down and see us building, I think it was a ship, but see us, it wasn't a high-rise apartment building. Come on.
Right.
Right.
So, and they see it. And what did they say? We need to stop this right now. Because if we don't stop this, there'll be nothing we can't stop them from doing. So what do? They destroy that, and they mess up, they meddle in our language so we can't understand each other. That doesn't sound like people who want you to grow and evolve.
Right.
But they also come and when Daniel's in the lion's den, they come and they save his life. When Peter's in prison in the book of Acts, they get him out of prison. They come and they tell Miriam, Mary, and Elizabeth about the babies they're going to have and the influence they're going to have. When Paul's on his way to Rome to speak to Caesar, they comfort him. I mean, he winds up dying there later, but they comfort him. So you get some stories of some of these folks who could care less, and you get some stories who say, let's just see where this experiment's going to go.
Reverend Michael Carter, you blow me away. It's just
Yes.
wow.
Yes.
I
Our words keep getting caught in our mouth.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that we did not have a formal thing set up because this is exactly what I wanted to do.
And
with
brother, I can always come back on and we can go
Yeah.
through the Bible a little more
Yeah,
and
that
fine
would be
tooth comb.
great.
I mean, because I can give you some chapters and verses, but I could also give you a little more of the history of how Yahweh, how the Old Testament became monotheized with all these gods, and then but they kind of trimmed off the fat, and it's just about Yahweh now. But it really wasn't at the beginning.
Yeah.
So we can do that another time.
Let's plan on it because
Yeah,
I just
absolutely.
Call me next week and let's set up a time. My daughter's graduating, so there's a little party every night
Sure.
starting tomorrow night until Sunday
Okay.
night. But we could do something, and I got my Bibles here. I can suggest to people what are good translations to get. We can go into a little more of the Elohim. We can go into the Mayan Popol Vuh. We can go in, because that's the thing. All these cultures, whether they're Norwegian, Viking, whether they're Filipino, whether they're African, they all have these stories
Right.
about beings coming down to the earth after a cataclysm, because there's been more than one flood. There's always one. Plato talks about this. And they start over. There's always some survivors, and they start over. We may be living in that time now. We could have a pole shift. We could get hit by an asteroid. You see what we're doing with climate change,
Oh,
but
yes.
we may be living in one of those times. He said it
Yeah.
happened every 5,000 years.
So
And
we're
he
due.
believed, Plato
Yeah.
believed in a god, and he believed in the gods. And he talks about this. He talks about Atlantis. All you got to do is go back and read Critias and Timaeus. And he talks about that. He talks about reincarnation. Plato's a bad man. When I was in school, they gave me a Xerox thing here. Just read that chapter. And
Right.
none of that was in there. But I got
No.
it now.
Man.
That is fascinating.
Yes,
Yeah.
we are going to have to.
Yes.
This is
You're
not.
definitely
This
have
is
you
not
back.
the end.
No,
No.
no.
But for this particular episode, let's do this. I know there's going to be a large amount of people in our audience that are going to want to reach out to you or are going to want to explore, before we get a chance to sit down again
Or read your books.
and read your
Yeah.
books. Can you kind of give us an idea where they can find you? How can they reach out to you
Sure.
and kind of
They
learn
can
more
reach
about
me.
it?
I have a Facebook fan page of Reverend Michael J. Carter. They can reach me by email. I answer my emails, michaeljscarter@gmail.com. Just reach out. I have another page on Facebook. It's just called Michael J. Carter. So I have those two, Reverend Michael J. Carter and Michael J. Carter. And I will, and you got my email. You can buy my books on Amazon. I got 5 books. I got a new book out, came out in December. It's called Enlightenment. It's a book of sermons. But my other books are on religion and UFOs. I got a book on prayer and healing. What else can I tell you real quick? I went out to Roswell a few months ago to shoot another TV show. I don't know if I'm on the initial episode. It's called, it's a brand new show. It's on Discovery Channel, June 19th, 10 o'clock. It's called Alien Encounters, Fact or Fiction.
Okay.
And I shot 2 new episodes of Ancient Aliens, but they haven't aired yet. One of them is called The Chosen, and the other one is called The Teachers. I mean, not unless they change the title. So
Sure.
you just keep your eyes open for those. And like I said, the other one's on June 19th at 10 o'clock on Discovery Channel.
We're gonna be there.
So that's it. I don't know if I'm on that first episode, but I'm definitely on there.
Okay.
And I'll be out in Michigan again in September for the UFO Con. It's in Lake Houghton. Lovely little conference. Bigfoot, paranormal, anything we talk about,
Yeah.
all of that. And that's on September 21 to September 24.
Okay.
Awesome.
Keeps me off
Yeah.
the streets. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I'll make sure and put links to
Yeah,
your
we're gonna-
books.
yeah.
So on our Facebook page when this comes
Yeah.
out, so
Yeah.
they can
And just
find
give
it
me some
easier.
dates and let's try and make it work.
Yeah,
I'll be
no-
around until the end of August. We're going on vacation, so I should
Okay.
be around.
Okay.
Perfect. We will
Okay.
definitely reach back out because this hour is just not long enough.
No.
No, it's not.
No.
Again, thank you so much. We really
Yeah.
appreciate it, and we will absolutely have you back, and we can't wait for that day.
All right, brother.
Just blown away.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still don't know what to say.
No. And that's not good because we're on a podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're married. The ums came
Yeah.
out at the same time. It's very interesting. I'm excited to talk with him again.
Yes.
I mean, I grew up, learning the Bible and everything and going through it like story by story. Like right now, and as he was talking, I kept thinking back to certain stories in the Bible. Like would it make sense if in this story there were UFOs or aliens or something? And not in every one, of course. But in some of them, it does make some sense.
Just crazy. It's
I
so
mean,
amazing, but
I'm not one to automatically shut someone down and be like, no, that can't happen. It does make a lot of sense.
yeah.
And, you know, this may be a very hard episode, like we said in the beginning,
Mhm.
for people to even maybe believe or to get on board with, and that's okay.
Yeah.
We're not asking you to. We're just asking you to listen, keep an open mind, because we don't really know the truth of anything. I mean, we're all learning and growing.
Mhm.
But especially in the recent
Yeah.
things that have happened
Yeah.
in the world, and like, you know, there are some people like us that have always been convinced that there's been aliens, UFOs. We know that there is.
Yep.
But for those of you that are still curious and searching, you might want to keep an open mind. I mean,
For sure.
we don't really know. And we the thing we do know, and he kind of touched on it a little bit, is our ancient civilizations have been visited by something.
Yes, they
I mean,
have.
we have, you know, the hieroglyphics, we've got the petroglyphs
Mhm.
that show, you know, animals. Maybe we'll put a few up.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that.
Of carvings of
Mm-hmm.
spaceships and of creatures that have big heads, very similar to what people say they are seeing. So back then for them, that was how they told their stories.
Yeah, it was.
And they're not going to draw something like, you know what I mean?
Well, they didn't really have
if they didn't see it.
And they didn't really have the propensity to lie.
Well, no, I
you
mean,
know?
what there was no reason to, and they
Right.
drew what they saw. Like they always drew their animal, like the animals around them, right? So
Mhm.
if you think about the Native Americans in the U.S., they were drawing
Well, they were drawing
buffalo, they were
they
drawing deer, they were drawing, you know, those types of animals. But then you got next to that, you got this alien, this thing
Yeah.
with like a alien head
Yeah. I mean,
and little like things in the sky, and even in like in Egypt in the hieroglyphics, they've got certain drawings, and I mean, I don't know. It's a lot to unpack. We're not
Yes.
asking you to.
which is why we're having him back.
Yeah, I
because
would
it's just-
love. I just kind of want to go through because I would love to see what he has to say. It's
Yeah.
so interesting.
He's got so much out there still. And I know yeah, I don't know what to say.
I know.
Guys,
Well, and he's been on all these shows, so he
Yes.
is very credible.
yes, he is.
He's very credible, so don't question that. I mean, I just blown away by him.
Also, if you guys listen to it on the podcast, it's perfectly fine. But I'd recommend if you have the opportunity to watch this on our YouTube as well, because he does bring up a few different things that he's demonstrating on screen. I highly recommend watching it.
Yeah, at least that little part.
Yeah, they're very interesting.
Yeah, they are. So I'm going to give you a list of, because he didn't name all of his books, but I'm going to name them, and I will make sure on our Facebook page when this episode is released to put links to each separate book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
Okay.
So his first one is Alien Scriptures, Extraterrestrials in the Holy Bible. A New World If You Can Take It, God, Extraterrestrials, and the Evolution of Human Consciousness. God Consciousness, a 30-day meditation manual for God-conscious thinking. The Metaphysics of Spiritual Healing and the Power of Affirmative Prayer. And he has a handbook for experiencers initiation, the spiritual transformation of the experiencer. And his recent work is a collection of sermons that's entitled Enlightenment. And they can all be purchased at Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
It's awesome.
So if you're interested in learning more or just curious, I would suggest, getting one, reading through it.
Yeah, guys.
He's got a lot to say.
And relish it while you can. I don't know what to say anymore. I'm completely... It doesn't happen often.
Well, and our guests do that to us.
Yes, they do.
Quite often. I mean, because when you are, and I would imagine just listening to it, you're like, wow.
Yeah.
You guys have time to process this.
Yeah.
We have to keep going, which is sometimes hard when you're taking all this stuff in. But no, he was fabulous.
He was.
Well, very kind, man.
Yes, he is.
I can see why he's a good reverend.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But tell us what you guys think. Leave comments. Do all those things. If you're listening on the podcast, leave us a rating. If you're watching on YouTube, of course, like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and
We will talk to you next week.
See you next week.